it's all about the likes, isn't it? No, obviously not. It's about creating a community and, most important, to find your super fans. Those fans that do everything for you, that buy your products, that buy your merchandise, that are defending you, whatever you need, those people you need to cater differently than the normal fans. But how to and identify them and like how to optimize your social media with AI. About that, we talk today to Ethan Monkhouse. He is president and co-founder of Naviro, and it's going to be a great talk for all you people out there who do marketing. Welcome to another episode of the Beginner's Guide to AI, an interview episode where I pick the brain of Ethan Monkhouse about AI. And before I talk too much about that, let's go directly to the interview. So today we talk to Ethan Monkhouse, and I can talk a lot about him. It's better if I give the microphone to him and he talks about what do you do. Welcome to the podcast, Ethan, first. And yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, small bit on me. My name's Ethan Monkhouse. I am one of the founders at Naviro. So a bit of what Naviro is, where we work with artists, creators, musicians, anyone in the creator economy in identifying super fans before they're actually fans and nurturing them across to actually bring them into the fan base. And we're trying to challenge the status quo around fandom. And that is, we really believe that fandom is fostered, not forced. Now, that's very easy to say, a lot more difficult to actually do. And the only reason we can do that is with the leaps and bounds that AI has introduced over the last few years. So obviously we'll dive a bit more into the technology itself, but as a top level, that's what Naviro does.
Yeah, no, this is super fans are those fans who are really like carrying your brand or so, no? It's like those there's 100 true fans or so. There's those things, how to identify and nurture them. How do you really identify those?
Yeah, so I think that is probably one of the most difficult parts for that current industry right now. Superfans are a buzzword in the sense where very much like AI, there's a lot of hype surrounding it, but very little clarity on how it's actually being utilized. And with superfans, they all differ depending on the artist and the genre. So because of that, the criteria differs. And I'm from a digital marketing slash software engineering background, so I'm very focused on what's deterministic, essentially what you can predict and what you can actually control. And when it comes to identifying superfans, inherently quite difficult. Now with AI, you can actually analyze what is qualitative, the parts of data that don't necessarily have a number associated with them. And that up until AI came into play, that was not possible, which is what was so good about it. So what we do is we look at an artist, we understand, okay, this is how they want to be perceived online. How are people perceiving on them online? And we're not just looking at the numbers side of things, we're looking at the people behind those numbers. So who are the current fans? How do they engage? What do they engage with? How do they like to be communicated to? Again, AI is a massive part in actually drawing that conclusion. And then we go off and we find people who fit that criteria. So we have to develop our own criteria for each artist or brand or creator we're working with to actually say, this is who your super fans are. This is what we categorize as super fan are. And these are the people who most closely align with that criteria.
Oh, yeah. So you look at the people who are there. Let's say you have Instagram, and then you go and see who reacts the most, and then analyze their profiles, or how does it work?
I think the best way of describing it is very much like a tree, and the roots of a tree. So in order for a tree to have that kind of solidity and structure, it needs to have stability. And it's the roots that give that. We are like the roots where we go off and explore all these different parts, come back to the center, and pretty much once there's enough stability there, then we can go for and actually strategize for that artist. So it's very much, we explore so many different avenues. So whether it be we pick up that, let's say someone engaged with the story you put up, that could be a dead end. or it could be a super fan, but you need to go and find out. So we go off, we'll have a look at that fan, figure out who they are, what they stand for. Do they advocate for the artists? Do they advocate for their merch? And perform
Uh,
this really in-depth analysis that up until, well, Naviro was very, very quantitative. There was a lot of vanity metrics, and I'm not too sure if that term's kind of widely used yet, but I do feel like it's getting a bit of consistency, where vanity metrics are the typical like impressions, likes, comments, all that sort of stuff. And that's very easy to look at and be like, oh, that did well. But
mm,
you want to know why that did well. And the only
okay.
way of figuring that out is by actually understanding the people who were the ones who liked it and the ones who engaged it.
So the motivation behind the like, or I
Yeah,
mean, if you have like 1,000 likes on a post, it sounds great, but it doesn't mean the people are really fans. That might be like just a viral wave or so. And
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, you want to really understand the motive behind the like there. Is it coming from scrolling on TikTok and not really paying attention and just
Mm,
liking, mass liking? Or are they closely following
mm, mm,
your brand as an artist or creator online, and they're really invested in you as a creator. So being able to distinguish between the two is like so critical, and
mm,
not found nowadays because as you mentioned, you could have thousands and thousands of likes, but not have anything to, I guess, show for it from a monetary side of things. And
yeah.
that is, as much as it's something a lot of creators don't particularly talk about, it is the big part because that's obviously what keeps you being able to continue what you
Yeah.
love doing for work, and makes it feasible. So we are kind of focused around identifying your like true fan base, but also monetizing them, whether it
Mm,
be from I guess, a financial perspective, but also an emotional perspective, because like getting your audience to invest in you as a creator or brand isn't just financial. It is emotional in the sense where when they're emotionally invested in you as a brand or a creator, they advocate for you. They
mm,
essentially become your marketers.
yeah.
And that is super important because you want to be creating a brand that you align with, but also it's a like a brand that people are perceiving you in the correct way.
Yeah. No, I like the advocate part because there's this the Philip Kotler, this marketing guy, and he made revisited the AIDA principle and said there's something missing. This is the advocate part because it's not just buying, but in the end, the super fan is the one that gives you the reach you need. This is viral reach. This is not paid.
Yeah.
This is like, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's
totally.
that's what's so critical, and there's a stat there which within the music industry, superfans make up 10% of the audience, yet they make up 70% of the revenue.
Ooh, yeah,
If
crazy.
you can figure out who they are,
Yeah,
it's a no-brainer.
yeah.
They're super value to an artist or a fan base as a whole, and you want to keep them aligned with you and what you stand for. And that's up until now been quite ambiguous.
Yeah, use AI for that. How does that work? Actually, it's not a
Yeah,
LLM. You don't give anything to ChatGPT, I assume.
yeah. So it's the thing that I think I might have mentioned it on a previously, but the change in AI over the last like year has been quite pronounced in the sense where we started off with like us hype around AI and no one really knew what it was. It did some stuff, ChatGPT all over the internet, and then that hype kind of died down a small bit, and now we're seeing the rise of vertical LLMs. What I mean by vertical LLMs is very, very specific use cases in the sense where it's not just a generic model which is going to be like handling every edge case. It's a specific use case for a specific industry doing a specific thing. And that's what Naviro is built off in the sense where we create fine-tuned models for each account or artist that we bring on board, which is fine-tuned to their content, their analysis we've done on all their channels, how they actually communicate online, so their tone of voice, all things like that. Because
Mhm.
if you take, say, ChatGPT, and you asked it to create a post for your content or something like that, or a content creation strategy, it's going to come back with something fairly generic.
Mhm.
And it could be good, but it's probably not going to be aligned with the audience in
Yeah.
the sense where every audience is different. And you also have a very kind of unique way of communicating. Everyone does, in the sense where certain ways you use captions, text, like lowercase letters, emojis, how they're all being used is what allows you to connect with the audience. It's that, I
Mhm.
guess, subconscious and subliminal messaging that happens, which is gonna it's gonna be what makes the audience feel connected to
Yeah.
the person or the
Yeah.
creator they're watching. And that is something that ChatGPT and all the other kind of like kind of conversational LLMs have, well, do, and it just doesn't really work in the long run. And so with Naviro, it is very much about creating this vertical LLM for each account that comes on board, which, as you can probably guess, involves a lot of data analysis initially to actually ingest all that data.
Yeah.
But once it's done and once that model is built out, that's something, well, we use it in so many different ways where accounts can actually just chat to their data essentially. So being able to talk to your fans when they are, well, data rather than talking directly to the fans, checking like, hey, how would you react to that post, is such a powerful tool to have.
That is totally interesting. Because the one thing is, I can see this is like you can describe the audience now. If I give a big prompt, it's mostly, naja, I type in your role or whatever. You're this and this now. But what's missing is I'm still like I'm still missing the audience, the people who really are behind it. And you put that in. That's one step. And the next step is I can even try to develop content with my, now I have a custom GPT or like a fine-tuned model or whatever, and I can talk to that and ask, should I go this direction or this direction? And based on the interest of my audience, I can then have a discussion about the topics. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the idea of being able to analyze that volume of data is super important as well. So for a lot of labels and agencies that we'd work with, one thing that they do quite manually is go through all the comments.
Mhm.
It's like, because that is where the sentiment lies. And it's quite exhausting when it's quite a big account. But then there's also the aspect of interpretation
Mhm.
where if you don't have a control for your interpretation or analyzing sentiment, there can that can introduce inaccuracies. And when you have a team or different teams analyzing different accounts, different people interpret different things differently. Sentiment is one of those things where you want it to be consistent because some comment might be interpreted by someone as positive, some might be neutral, and that can actually sway your sentiment analysis or what you
Mhm.
feel the audience is conveying in posts or like in the comments and channels, things like that. And so it's super important to actually standardize that analysis. And up until now, as I mentioned, like qualitative analysis was very difficult. It was very difficult to actually analyze the things that naturally computers couldn't analyze. And with AI, you're able to actually put that analysis or extract that analysis from things that are just not deterministic. How people feel, how people convey things, and how they people are inherently irrational. Like you don't. Oh, is it rationally irrational? Is the the phrase that I like to use, where we do a lot of things that don't make sense, but we do it consistently. And being able to pick up on those specific things and those traits is super important when it comes to that long-term growth.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's really important. And back to the sentiment and analyst, so people on the in the headphones now they hear and know what it is. It's like if you have irony, it's one of the things where I think it's the best example. If you just go quantitative, you count like the knots, everything.
Mm,
There's a knot in, so it's negative. But it might be irony, and if you have an understanding of the sentence, then you might realize it's irony, and
yeah.
the AI today should realize, okay, it's irony because, yeah, it's better
No,
in
exactly.
understanding. Yeah. Mhm.
And I think there's just to kind of add on to that, I think what you can do is take something that is, I guess, not that binary analysis where it is like irony, and it can be fit into something that can be standardized. So one thing we do is we create personas for fans. So we take all that data, all that information on what we've pulled out about individual fans and tag them in that sense. And then whether they're categorized as a super fan, a mega fan, an active fan, an engager, wherever they sit in that
Mm.
fan journey, but being able to segment it and actually create personas for each of those segments is so critical when it comes to actually building out your content strategy,
Yeah.
because it allows you to just understand, okay, this is a big segment of my audience. This is the general profile they have, but outside the metrics.
Yeah. So the I can like nurture people to become super fans because I know I have so many people in the audience that are like this. I have to give them this content to keep them active and
Yeah.
involved. And so yeah, oh yeah, yeah, great.
Yeah.
I love the concept of personas anyway. That's like I think not many people or not enough people use it to make profile ideal buyer persona of the people. In this not case, not buyer or but fan persona. It's I like it. Yeah, it's a good thing. Um, going a step back, we talk about AI. Yeah, but what did get you into AI actually?
I think it's actually been around, it's been part of my kind of career for a lot longer than I realized, in the sense where, so my background is in software engineering and finance, and all throughout university, it was always about finding the ways, a way in which we can make something easier to understand or easier to do. And I didn't realize, but a lot of these side projects that I had going on would have involved some form of, well, machine learning at that stage. Not so much ChatGPT, that wasn't really around, but it was very much, okay, something is hard to convey in the current sense, in this current state. How do we make it easier for anyone to understand? And that's where AI started to come into play. Because the one thing AI does is it really breaks down all sorts of communication barriers, because you can actually, I guess, convert so many different ways of understanding something into other ways of understanding it, which is like completely changed the game. Just back to like when I was figuring this all out, it was only when I started to learn more about the fundamental concepts. So, not going to go into them, but things like gradient descent and actually how it all works, um, that I realized that, hey, this is actually really cool. So I was introduced to it from a very technical level, and it was only after that I started to realize how beneficial it could be to actually build quickly, in the sense where it became mainstream. And as it became mainstream, I became more fixated on, okay, how can we extract away the technical aspect and get the value out of it without
Mm.
knowing anything about, say, coding, things like that. And now look at the speed all this is moving. It's, I think it was, I can't remember who said it, but I think it was either um, Bill Gates, or it could have been, I'm not too sure who it was, but they pretty much said that English is going to be the top programming language
Ah, yeah, yeah,
going
yeah,
forward.
yeah.
And that is so true. And I think that is also really important to note, though, that it's a different type of English. That's one thing that I have realized, that I think we're in need of a bit of a shift there. Is obviously prompt engineering is becoming huge, but then how do you communicate with the computer, is something that is only really coming to fruition right now.
Mm.
And communication with computer is so inherently different to communication with a person. Over time, it will get closer, but I think there's a lot of time and resources that need to be put into actually linking that conversation together when we're interacting with tech versus human.
This is the basic idea. People have to learn still how to communicate with the AI, but it gets getting easier. Like you said, programming, yeah, at a certain stage you needed to program, but now it gets easier. There's interfaces. I think like the artists you have, the creators, they are not the programmers, so they need something they can actually use. And um, how did you come up with the idea to go into the creator economy? Let's say make tools for creators.
Yeah, so I was always like super interested in big data. That was always a fascination of mine. And the one thing that was always limiting me was compute power. Um, as in, I remember when I had like a big data set, and I had it all on a USB, and the USB ran out of storage, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I can't keep it there." And I was like, okay, we'll put it onto a hard drive. Hard drive had all that data. But then I ran into compute issues where I was trying to run analyses, and I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the compute power. And this is, I'm kind of going back quite a bit there. But that fascination on data eventually led to a fascination in human behavior. So having a kind of software engineering and finance background, it's very quantitative. It's very, okay, this is what the data is saying. That must be the answer. But then on the flip side, my career took me down a digital marketing route, which is interesting because that is almost the opposite. You really need to understand people, understand how people think, what the, I guess, the impact of digital has. Like I've had a lot of research on that, where it's like, how do people behave online and how's it different? And then how do we react to it and capitalize on it? And it was actually the marriage between both those two parts of my life, the quantitative big data analysis and then the marketing side of things, which led to the first iteration of Naviro,
Mhm.
which was to marry those two together and make it easy for people to actually use. And that's what we started building off initially. And my co-founder Lola, she had a meeting with high flyer label exec who, let's just say, there was no cap on resources, and they faced the constant problem of like they couldn't identify their super fans. And well, we were like, well, actually, what we've built here, we could change a few things, and we could probably do that. We could probably figure it out.
Mhm. Mhm.
And myself and Lola were always at heart like love the creative industry. Like it's been a passion of ours. And so any excuse to dive back into it, we're going to take that opportunity. But as we built out the technology more and more, we realized how much there is to build in the space. There's so much to like accomplish there, because that industry is quite traditional and dated at the moment. I think it's due for quite an overhaul. And I remember I think it was early January. We, myself, our lead engineer, and my co-founder Lola, we were all just coding away. Did like a stint of coding. I think it was maybe like 3 a.m. in New York when we finally got the initial version of the algorithm to work. And I remember we were just sitting there, we were like, I think it's working. And it was like it started spitting out the analysis of like a profile, and it was scarily accurate. And it wasn't just vanity metrics. It was really like very, it's almost like if you went into like an interview and it came, yeah, it was really reading the room essentially. And that's when we were like, okay, this is really cool. We're going to keep building this out. And so that's where it started. And like, obviously it's iterated as time goes on, as we kind of adapt to feedback and things like that. But that's how that all started.
3 in the morning. That's the typical thing with programming. It's always like it's never
Yeah.
at like 1 in the afternoon or so. It's
Oh
always
no.
those times. Yeah. Um, in general, I mean, we talk about creator economy, but as far as I see it, it's like everybody who has social media in a certain scale can profit from this because they all are basically creators if they do it right.
Yeah. And not just a certain scale, at any scale. Like they don't have to have any, like, one example we use with artists is, say we bring on a label. They've got an emerging artist and they haven't really got too much traction. They haven't got enough data. We can then look at an artist that they think is similar or done quite well,
Mhm.
and essentially reverse engineer what worked for them
Mhm.
and implement that as their strategy for the emerging artist. And you can do it with a lot more certainty because you can cross-reference the audience. So if you've got an emerging artist and then a successful artist you want to base and mouse off, you do an analysis on both their audiences, you see where the common traits are, and then you get a number at the bottom of it saying like, here, this is the similarity, and this is what you need to adapt strategically to actually get that to drive results for you. The example I can give is like when a trend goes viral, and it can go viral on one account and have hundreds of millions of views. And then you can do the exact same thing, put it on another account, and it just doesn't go viral at all. And that is like that is exactly it. That's why you need audience analysis and like in-depth audience analysis, because every audience is different. They're all going to react differently to different things. They have different personality
Mhm.
types, which means they have to be communicated to differently. And it is so crucial to understand that.
I can imagine if you put short video in different platforms, like let's say Facebook and TikTok, and you expect the video to go viral on both, then it's probably not going to work because one is maybe a younger audience, lots of memes, the other is more conservative. Makes sense. Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
adapt then. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, so but I like the idea that you can just learn from others and you don't have to invent everything yourself, but you can see. And if I take normal firms, would be the same. I just start to optimize my social media or so, and I start creating. I got the person on board who creates, and then in which direction should I go? And then yeah, there are other firms who do it similarly or similar business, and I can just not copy, but get some hints how to develop my strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's taking inspiration from what's working.
Mhm.
And I think that's a big part. Like we're in a world nowadays where there's a lot of data that's gate kept, um, which is unfortunate, but I think the world's biggest data source is public data. And so that's what we build a lot of our solutions off. It is using public data because, well, that is what's available to everyone, and you can get so much insight from it. The only caveat is you need to make sure that you kind of clean it correctly and make sure that the data is reliable.
I find that really interesting. There's a lot of information there, and so I find it funny to do like betting or so, sports betting, let's say, or so you have many people who bet and they bet on their team, and they maybe know something, and then you have the people who watch like 24-hour sports. They know a lot, and in between there's all the data for everybody. So you just need a tool to get the data. And this is
Hmm.
probably the same what you do. The data is, you say, it's public data, so it's there, but few people really use it. And you can't, as a human, I mean, if you do that full time, maybe, but you basically need someone to do it for you, and that may be the AI, probably.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like just going back to sports betting, like what we're doing is allowing someone to get the insight and the value from watching sports betting 24/7 without having to watch it, well, with the equivalent of watching it for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, the people don't have time. If you take the creator, I mean, the interesting thing compared to a firm can, I don't know, they hire 5 people to do this. They can do everything. But if you're a creator, you normally don't have the resources. You have to
Hmm.
create. Also, you're probably not the type. I mean, you are for a good reason. If you're a musician, you're good at music and not at social media. I mean, it might be, but it would be a coincidence. But you have to be good at music. So every tool that helps you makes it easier for you, and you don't have to distract resources away from what you want to do. Yeah, sounds really good.
Exactly. It's like having an entire team in your pocket in that sense. And I think like one of the things that creators also struggle with is the direction.
Mhm.
So it's one thing knowing what process to do and what to like extract from like social media analysis, but it's another thing knowing, well, what do I do with that?
Yeah. I just remember this thing that we developed, or we moved from the social media to discovery media more and more. So you could, in old times, like 5 years ago, you could rely that you post something and your audience likes it and they follow you and they get everything. But now you have to perform with each video you put out, or each post has to perform. And that makes it much harder
Yeah.
because just one hit doesn't help you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a consistency game, to be honest.
Mhm.
And it's knowing where to be consistent is also super important. I've seen several strategies that just didn't work, and I remember us going in and kind of trying to figure out like why is it not working? And it's a fixation to be consistent, but not necessarily in the right areas. There's an example would be that people think you have to post every day. You don't have to post every day. It's much better to post 3 times a week with really, really thought out content
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
7 times a week where it's not great or like
Lukewarm.
arguably
Yeah.
low. Yeah. It does more damage in the long run.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's mindset shifts with a lot of different factors. And once that mindset shift occurs, it becomes so automated in terms of the actual implementation and execution of those strategies.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, you don't want to bore the people with what you post. That should be always interacting content that makes people click or interact. Yeah, and it also makes sense that what I like in this, if I would start and I don't have an idea what to post, so I have a system. I go to my toolbox. I get out my phone basically, and it tells me, okay, you can go there and there. Because as far as I teach lots of people who are like they start social media, AI or whatever, but and the start is always the most problematic.
Yeah. It's getting from 0 to 1 is the tricky bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is really, yeah, I think there we need those tools that help us. So yeah, but one thing is again coming back to you as a person, how do you use AI for yourself, for your business? Do you use ChatGPT or?
Everywhere. I use it with emails are probably my biggest use case for it. So everyone writes emails differently, and I have so multiple different companies. So the way that I interact with emails with those companies differ. And one thing I use is for drafting.
Mm,
So I have this app. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Superhuman, and it's an email client, but it has the ability to give context to your email account. So I can say, okay, this is my Naviro account. This is my role. This is what I do. This is what Naviro does. Generally, this is how I communicate. All that information, and then it keeps an eye on all my emails and how I respond to things. And then what it means is, well, I can draft whenever I get an email, it can draft a answer that's about 80% of the way. I just have to go in and change a few bits, add a few bits, and it speeds
mhm.
up emailing so much.
Oh
Because so
yeah.
much time is lost on emailing, to be honest. And CBeamon's one app that I picked up maybe about 6 months, 7 months ago, and it has completely changed the game in terms of the emailing side of things.
I will definitely put that in the show notes and try it myself. How much time you waste with email? That's like, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's just again a mindset shift. So my inbox used to be a lot of emails sitting in there. Yeah, I think now max emails in my inbox will be maybe like 10 at any one time. It's cleared most of the time.
Yeah.
So it's a mindset shift in that sense. And then I also use it for monitoring. So in the sense where all meetings I have, like you might have heard of Fireflies. It's a note-taking software. It comes onto your Zoom and collects everything. The problem with that is it can be a bit long-winded sometimes. And for me, a lot of those no, the main thing I'm trying to get out of those notes is the action items. I really just
Mhm.
want to know, like, okay, what was discussed and what do I need to take action on? And that's when you can bring in pipelines that that use AI. So as soon as those notes are ready on Fireflies, fires off a notification to my workflow. And my workflow goes off and says, okay, what happened during this meeting? Let me pull out the action items. Okay, these action items for Ethan, let's add that to his reminders list. It'll ping a couple other people just to verify, like, actually, these are the correct reminders. They make sense. And then it will take all that, format it into a much nicer notes document, send it into Notion, and then notify all the attendees that the notes are available.
And this is an
And
automatic process.
yeah, all automated.
Great.
And the beauty of it is it makes things like feedback tracking so much easier.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if I had a meeting with, say, a client and they were like, talked about a feature, and anyways, I could then look at that Notion doc and I can just go, okay, feature request, and I can just type in the feature they requested, and it just will order. It'll all be tied together so that when I go to our feedback track, I can see, okay, 7 clients have requested this feedback. I can see exactly what meetings this occurred to, and it makes action a lot easier because your decision making process is, well, there's not much process to do because it's literally telling it to you in on paper. So that's a big thing that I
Mhm.
find on my day to day that works quite well. And then lastly, the scheduling aspect,
Mhm.
because one thing that, like, there's so many different ways of like managing time, things like that. Time boxing, probably the one I use the most. It is inevitable that things will crop up, And for the first time, you've now got software that can, well, react to that instantly. So if a meeting crops up, it overlays on some time boxing thing I've got going. You've got so many different tools out there, clockwise motion, all these different ones. They all work great. That'll actually see it, understand, okay, this is should have an hour there. It's going to need a context. You can't really have a break in context there. Oh, like you don't want a context switch. Let's slot that to later in the day, and then we'll fill that with something else.
Mm.
And that's phenomenal because it's just eliminating that busy work. But then, like as an engineer, context switching is like the bane of productivity. Like you really can, it slows you down so much. And so with developing, especially like, yeah, coding, you want to be essentially locked in for hours with
Mm.
no distractions. Because as soon as you get one, it's like, oh, we'll just switch into that, switch into that. And then it becomes busy work. So I think in terms of just my work-life balance, that is where AI has had the biggest impact in a
Oh,
good way.
great use cases. Yeah, yeah. And okay, and not everything is like out of the box, but I mean, things develop, and all the people who listen, they probably have an IT department or at least one guy who can like set that up. And it's really interesting how you organize. I mean, that saves you, I don't know, 20, 30% of
Mm,
your hours you use up for work, probably, or you can either work more, have more time for
yeah.
yourself, or whatever. It's great.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think there's small things you can do. Like I fixate, I love automation. I love kind of freeing up more time, using tech to free up more time. And like with the surge of AI, like that's just made it so much more possible. Like you can free up so much more time with it because things that a lot of the time when I'd be building out workflows where I'd be restricted would be the human input, the times where I couldn't write a piece of code to do something. And that's no longer the case because AI can essentially make a decision for you as to the importance of something. And that is just crazy in the sense where like I have I don't know if you've heard of Aura Ring before. They're a health tracking app, a health tracking ring. So it's just you're wearing it, it's just tracking everything, and they have an API, which I'm not familiar with APIs and just the way they interact. Um, yeah, essentially just allowing you to create custom, allow things to happen on the basis of the ring telling you things. And so what I did was I built out a couple little programs. It was like, okay, when I say have a really bad night's sleep, it's going
Mhm,
to
mhm.
push my alarm out. It's going to make sure any of my
Oh,
meetings
oh,
are
great.
like pushed out an hour or two. Because it knows that, hey, if I do force myself to get up, it's just going to be a write-off in terms of productivity. And
Yeah.
it's things like that which just you forget about them because it's like so seamless. It's actually only when I forget to bring my ring somewhere or I go back home to Ireland and like none of my smart home stuff is working and I'm busy talking to the wall and I'm like, wait, why is this not saying anything? Oh yeah, it's not here. And it's just so crazy how reliant you become on it. But that's when you really know something's really slotted into your workflow is when you forget about
Yeah, yeah. It's like the idea of the butler or the servant, the perfect ones is the ones you don't realize they are there. Yeah. Ah, yeah, but that's great. I mean, one has to imagine we are now at a point where that already works, no? I mean,
yeah,
it's crazy how things move, how quickly they move. I like
yeah.
it. Yeah.
I think the one other example, which is quite funny, is for this call, it would have seen that this was an interview in the Zoom link, and so it automatically would have connected up these microphones. So
Hmm.
instead of it using my webcam, which is above it, it would have turned on the DSLR, which is a nice better camera, and then instead of using the computer microphone, it switched to the microphone over here, and that's all off just one tag. Again, just a workflow of like it being fed into an LLM and the LLM interpreting it.
I mean, this is like this the factor of understanding. Before it was like you could, I mean, you put something, I have an Outlook calendar on my phone. I put something in, and if I write doctor, it makes a doctor symbol. No, but as soon as I change something, or like I write it wrong, or I don't mention that it's a doctor, but just the name, it doesn't understand anymore. So it's like it doesn't get what's behind it. So, and this is the next
Yeah,
step, I think.
it's getting there. It is
Yeah.
really getting there. And I think the next 2 years are going to be super important in that sense. think regulation is something that we really need to stay on top of.
Mm.
It's a lot of new technology out there, and I think there's a bit lax on the regulation side of things, which inevitably will come, but I think it
Mm.
needs to happen a bit quicker.
If you have all the data of your home and your body there, it's better be regulated and not the firm. Might be that the firm, like this ring firm, they are totally good, but then they get bought up by, let's say, not so friendly actors, and then all your data's out there.
Yeah,
That is a problem. Yeah,
exactly.
there's regulation needed. That's a good point. Let's come to the last question of the interview. My typical listeners will know it. It's about Terminator scenario or Matrix scenario. What
All
do you
right.
think?
Is it possible? Is it
Yeah. What do you think? Is it possible? Is it probable? What do you think? Do
Yeah,
we
two
get
different
enslaved?
questions. Is it possible? Yes, most definitely. Is it probable? No. I think the I guess the immediate I've actually, now that I think of it, there's always that concern. It's like, oh, are we gonna is AI gonna be the extinction of the human race? Is that
Yeah.
and I think a way of framing it is it's very similar to when we've had new technology come in. If you take when cars were introduced
Mm,
commercially, um the first car crash, we didn't do nothing. We didn't just continue to let everyone crash. And no, we introduced speed limits, we introduced
mm,
regulations, we introduced ways of actually minimizing car crashes. And I think with AI,
yeah.
it's very similar. It's like the Terminator Matrix scenario is, yes, possible, improbable because there's so many steps before that
Mm,
to get to that state that if we do nothing when those smaller, less significant instances and situations happen, then we got a bit of a problem. But I think we're very, like, inevitably we're going to adapt when things go wrong. And I think,
yeah.
yeah, to bring me back to regulation, like that's something where as we bring in, there's going to be instances where AI goes a bit haywire or something happens. Not going to be Matrix or Terminator
Mm,
detrimental to
mm.
the human race, but it's gonna spark initiative to actually regulate it and actually take action and introduce the speed limits of the AI world. And I think that is what's going to allow us to just, well, not end up in that situation. I mean, if all common sense went out the window and we did nothing, then I'm sure that could be a state we could reach in. Yeah, you definitely could be. But I think as a race, we should know better than to just ignore when things start to go wrong.
Yeah, that actually, I like the example of traffic. I mean, we have regulations. The cars are dangerous. They are now 2 tons or whatever. And if people would go
Mm,
around them unregulated, that would be a problem.
yeah.
But it's not. I mean, because we are not, as a human race, we want to survive by walking off the street. I mean, that's makes sense for me. Yeah, that's really a good thought. I like it. Yeah, it helps. So, Ethan, thank you for the interview. Do tell us, where can we find you? I will put everything in the show notes. And
Yeah, I mean, no, thanks for having me. It was great to chat. I honestly, I could go on for ages when it comes to AI. It's
we do
such
that
a
next year.
fascinating.
We make another one of that.
But yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. That's my probably go-to. LinkedIn and Instagram would be my top two. And then also if anyone wants to check out Naviro, it's naviro.io is our website, and you can sign up, have a play about if you want to hop on a call with myself and Lola. Happy to do that as well.
Wow, great. Thanks. That was enlightening. Was the first time we talked about creator economy on the podcast and super fans. And as I'm basically coming from online marketing and content marketing, whatever, so that really gave me something to work on. As you said, you can talk long about that. In the prep call, we had other stuff we talked, so we definitely make a
Yeah,
follow up
yeah.
on that here.
A lot more, yeah.
Just a
Awesome,
cliffhanger.
unreal. No, thanks again. It was great to chat.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And yeah, see you next year.
All
Bye.
right. See ya. Chat ya.
Well, that was quite something to how to identify your real fans, how to go for them, and how to do that with AI much easier than you could do anything before. Ethan has a good system there. I think I will see which clients of mine can also use that because it really makes sense. Also, what I found really interesting, how Ethan uses AI in the house. That would be a whole episode, I think. Let's see what we do next year, in 2025. So great that you listened up until here. And once you're already here, you can subscribe to the podcast in your podcast app, or you go to argoberlin.com/newsletter, and then you get a mail in your mailbox once a new episode is out, and maybe some other stuff as well. Yeah, thank you for listening. It's Dietmar from Argo Berlin signing off.